Hello and welcome to our 22nd communications room session. 𝗵𝗽𝗶 is with me again. And today we would like to share our thoughts on the topic of purpose. Many people are talking about purpose. Some are in favor. Some say this is just another buzzword. I am convinced, and I can say we are convinced that especially in times of uncertainty or in times of change, purpose is something rather important to find one's way through those uncertain and changing times. So 𝗵𝗽𝗶, how do you see this topic of purpose?
Yeah, I think the topic is definitely of crucial importance, I would say, nowadays. I think it has to do somehow on the one hand side with this overall trend towards more reflection. That's, I think, what brings many people in this mode of wanting to know their purpose and getting on a path to find out what the purpose is. And the other trend is like you mentioned, that there's also a bit like a negative discussion around the topic, that some people treat it as a buzzword, and I think that's a bit like a misunderstanding probably associated with this topic. And for me, I say I'm more on the first side, those that think that we all should reflect on this reason for being, like the Japanese define it. So in Japanese they use this word and also a methodology associated with finding your own purpose. It's called the Ikigai. It's around a set of questions you continuously actually reflect on during your life. We can maybe touch on this in a second. But I also think that it's important that it should almost be an ongoing exercise for everyone, because it helps so much to deal actually with the complexity that we have, and it gives you this compass actually to act upon.
Yeah, definitely. That is, I think, the decisive point. To have something that provides the opportunity to get a clearer picture of where you want to go to, what the direction is. So something that really gives orientation. And this starts, of course, with the individual. I agree completely. And before we get more into that and more about the reason for being, let me reflect a few seconds on why some people think that this is a buzzword. This comes into play when we look at what especially companies have been doing in the last 2 years. And some really took the effort, and then it's not the companies, but the ones who had the company really took the effort to develop such thing like a purpose. And then there have been others who have been just taking on the present fashion, let me put it that way, and let others put together something that could be used as a purpose, and then it's superficial, and then it does not really have the substance to make sense as a kind of tool to give orientation. And there maybe that skepticism comes from. And if you really want to do it right, then it has to start on the individual level. I agree completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's somehow actually a starting point to start a journey for all of us. Yeah, we can immediately start with this reflection. And I just mentioned the Japanese concept of Ikigai, so let me just maybe read out the 4 questions that are included in this concept. It's a question what you love, it's a question what you're good at, it's a question what you can be paid for, and a question what the world needs in the end. And that, I think, it's also a good concept that actually merges so so to speak, the private life and the work life, because it looks at a person from a holistic perspective. And these questions, I mean, they probably never. There's not a final answer to these, so they include this ongoing reflection. But there's also an opportunity, to come to this flow situation. I think we are lacking maybe at the moment in the society, but also in many companies. So if you look at still at the figures, how many people look for new jobs at the moment, and the satisfaction levels in jobs, for example, or also the still growing figures in also psychological diseases, I think, which has a lot to do still, that people do not fully identify with their work. And reflecting on this kind of questions, and also the overlap, of course, between these questions, that's also in the focus of the concept. This can be a concrete step in the right direction, I would say, that there's not different worlds you live in as a person, but that this work side of life and the private side of life and the well-being overall, so that there's also a good life ending in the end, coming in the end, that this is in full focus from a more holistic perspective. That's why I think this concept is quite valuable.
Valuable, and I would even say necessary. You and I had discussions already on in which way of perceiving us in relation to others are we, for centuries now we have been taking the kind of perspective, the perspective which is, here am I and here is the other person. So it's a us and them, or me and the others, and it's high time to accept and to acknowledge and to realize that we are parts of networks, whether we like it or not. But as humans, if we want to be humans, we interact with others, and therefore there's no distinction between private and public life or private and work life, because it's all interconnected. Mm-hmm. And at this point, it's more important than ever that people have the chance to develop their individual purpose, because without such an individual purpose, anxieties may rise, and if you are afraid or of whatever, of societal developments or of COVID, one outcome one very probable outcome is that you are not able to reflect in a sensible way anymore, and then people are standing in the streets and shouting at each other, instead of trying to find a common sense or a common purpose based on their individual purpose. And this is where it becomes so interesting. I am convinced that if you build the individual purpose, or have 100 people build an individual purpose, even amongst those 100 randomly found people, there will be at least one overlap or two overlaps in the individual purposes. So creating or developing an individual purpose can be a bridge builder to get into a real constructive dialogue with others, respecting them as part of the network that we are all in.
Definitely, yeah. So, and the interesting thing is that this individual purpose only starts to make sense in exchange somehow with others. So that's what I feel, yeah. So you can reflect for yourself, but the question then is, how does it resonate with others? Because any impact, which will definitely be included in your purpose statement somehow, because you all want to make an impact, it always has to do with other people, either at work, at home, in society overall.
Definitely.
There can be different levels, but I think only through this exchange it's also possible to keep this purpose alive for yourself, and also to bring it alive in a wider scope, whether it's in business or in society. I think these distinctions somehow, maybe get diluted even through this, and all of it has to do, we come back to our point, Mark, has to do with communication, with dialogue, with exchange, and to do this in a respectful way, somehow.
Yeah. And there I think, or I'm convinced as well, people who have taken this first step to reflect on and develop an individual purpose will be able to get into a constructive and fruitful dialogue much better than those who didn't. Because if you don't have your compass, as you said, and your North Star, you are probably driven by majority opinions in the public or whatsoever, and then you just repeat opinions of others. And this leads again to just shooting positions at each other without really talking to each other. And there's a famous scientist in Germany, 𝗬𝗵𝗽𝗶, who thought a lot about how to get into a constructive dialogue. And one of his recommendations is really to take this step back and reflect on what is your purpose. Could the other person that you think is in the concrete opposite not have a hidden purpose that is not far away from you, or that at least opens the door to get into a dialogue? And I personally, I'm convinced that there's always at least one fundament, one basis to get into a constructive dialogue. For example, if you want to make it very blunt, no one is interested to leave his or her grandkids devastated planet Earth. No one. So, and maybe sometimes it's necessary to get to such basic common purposes. Maybe it's in other cases it's much easier. Still, it needs to have such individual purposes to open that door, to go over that bridge, to get into a constructive dialogue, which we are as societies are missing more than ever before, at least for the last 150 years.
Yeah, I fully agree with this, and I'm also, as usual, pretty optimistic that somehow I think we can also create this, or can get back to this positive momentum also in society and in businesses, if we get more aware of these individual purposes, because like you said, Mark, I think it's quite hard to find probably a negative individual purpose overall, or that's at least my hope. And if there is one, then it might get more transparent, or people will be aware of it, and it will be challenged maybe by others, which can also happen in dialogue. But in total, I think if people really get into this mode of reflecting, I think that most of them, if not all, will come to something positive, because we are human beings, and we want to have a future and live in the future and contribute to this future somehow. That's the way I see it, and bringing this together can unleash, I think, a huge potential and create this positive momentum overall in these dialogues. And if everyone takes the individual purpose serious and acts upon this individual purpose, then also the right actions will happen on this.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, let's talk a little bit about companies. Um, um, if you bring a top management together and let them first develop their individual purpose and then discuss about the common purpose, um, they will come to a substantial result, which then is appropriate to share with the stakeholders. First of all, to maybe discuss with employees, and it's all, the interesting thing is it's all based on the individual purposes, and the common purpose or common understanding will, so to say, emerge or evolve out of those individual purposes. And that's a very interesting thing, that first this happens, and there are examples and books have been written about it, and we have seen it. Um, um, Second, a common purpose that is being developed this way, it's a much stronger one than one that is just being put together by someone who is paid for it. Because everybody has then given part of him or her into that common understanding, and therefore the self-obligation is much stronger than having just someone putting putting a nice story together.
Mm-hmm.
So commitment will be very much stronger, and the impact of this path will be a much bigger one, a much stronger one.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I fully agree to this perspective, yeah, that this common purpose and this collective purpose then is immediately in the room somehow if these individual purposes are around. I mean, maybe it's not like adding up the individual purposes, but it's a new meaning and understanding of the impact, for example, this company can make, then automatically there, and that leads to another meaningful discussion, how to bring it to life. And I'm also convinced that a purpose developed in this way is much stronger, because it's also much easier than to transfer this, or to take, for example, the decisions based on such a purpose, because people will have the association with their own purpose and will act upon it in a much easier way than rather than it's something artificially developed or even bought from some consultants from outside, for example.
Yeah. So, and people are intrinsically motivated, which is the only way that people can be motivated, we all know. And therefore, then the magic happens, as the former CEO of Best Buy named it, 𝗵𝗽𝗶𝗶. The magic happens that all of a sudden the people are able to create, produce, make happen much more than without that magic.
For sure. And that's important, I think, why it's actually an exercise for everyone, to come back to the beginning of our talk. I think then in such a case, really everyone will be able to associate with this overall company purpose, for example, but will also immediately know which contribution can I make and what's my impact in the job that I do in my position.
Yeah. And then it's not only companies, it may be communities, villages, or even cities that may have things to discuss. And if there as well, if people start with their individual purpose and to exchange information about their individual purpose, they are already in a completely different dialogue than in just throwing positions at each other. And therefore, in such a kind of approach, there will definitely be more winners than in any other.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And yeah, and we come into this mode to really make the future happen, to take the right steps to solve the problems, actually, because we are motivated to do it. And Mark, we just discussed the other day, that's also actually it works across generations, so it's not just for generation Z or for Y, also for the baby boomers and everyone else. Because once you come to this discussing or keeping this reason for being in focus for yourself and for everyone else, I think this automatically also brings this long-term thinking and perspective somehow.
Which, by the way, is very important to practice. Thinking about little or smaller and smaller information pieces that people are willing or even able to digest. Makes a lot of sense to bring us all back to think a little bit more long term, as you said, because then things like ethics and responsibility come naturally into the reflection, and then hopefully naturally the next step is that we are able to get back to that fruitful dialogue that is absolutely necessary to ensure a bright future for us.
Yeah. Maybe towards the end of our dialogue today, coming back to this concept of Ikigai, I just took a look at, because in the Ikigai, it's a whole philosophy actually in Japan. It's also closely associated with the Kaizen philosophy, and there are some principles behind. So let me just read out some of them. So one is actually starting small, so doing it step by step. In the purpose, I would say do it for yourself on your own. Learning to let go, so having the purpose in focus, and then also taking the decisions on it. It's not necessary to continue with everything, to bring purpose, your individual purpose to life. It's living in balance and sustainability. So it's on the one hand side this long-term thinking, and the balance will come automatically. Like you mentioned, Mark, getting rid of the fears and things people are afraid of at the moment. It can come through this reflection, I'm pretty sure. And being in the here and now at the same time, because you can always find some concrete action to do.
And therefore, it's so important, as you have put in the beginning of our meeting, it's so important to see that not as a one-time thing, but as an ongoing, we could even say process, to do that exercise frequently. Not daily maybe, but it could make sense to do that once a year, which, for example, I did and still do, to reflect, where do I stand, what am I happy with, what would I like to get rid of, or those things, what is my contribution to society, and what can I do for it. And so I try to recalibrate, so to say, my individual purpose once a year, which does not mean that I change to 180 degrees or something like that, but situations change, challenges change, and therefore it's important to do that again and again and again. And that helps you to really know your direction and the guardrails you want to have, and the steps you want to take. And with that, it's easier to even withstand situations of change or a complexity that we are as individuals are not able to cope with.
Yeah, that's almost some great last words, I would say. Thanks, Mark. So, thanks to you for joining today's communications talk. I took away also the sentence you quoted, Mark, that the magic will happen. So I'm pretty confident the magic will happen once we deal with individual purpose.
Yes.
So let's get started right away. We invite you to go on your journey. And yeah, looking forward to your comments on today's session below here on YouTube or on LinkedIn, and looking forward to see you next time in the communications room. Have a great time and see you soon. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.